I'm 70 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I understood what love meant. I met Martha when we were both just 23. She walked into the library wearing a red scarf and humming a tune I didn't recognize, and for some reason, I knew I'd marry her. I was never the romantic type. At least I didn't think I was, but something about her silences spoke louder than most people's shouting. We married a year later, moved into a modest house in a quiet town, and built a life filled with routines. Teaching by day, gardening in the early evenings, crossword puzzles on Sundays. We didn't live loud. We lived consistent. Martha made tea every morning. Same teapot, same 2 cups. She liked to add honey and would always leave the spoon in mine, even though I asked her not to. It became a small ritual, one I secretly loved. I'd watch her from across the table, her glasses slipping down her nose, lips forming a soft frown while reading the newspaper. I told myself we were happy, not in the movie kind of way, but in the way that felt earned. There was comfort in the mundane. Things began to shift, though it was subtle. She started taking longer walks alone. She'd receive phone calls in the other room and hang up quickly when I walked in. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. After all, after nearly 5 decades together, wasn't she allowed some space? But it wasn't just space. It was distance. Her laugh became rarer. Her eyes stopped meeting mine when I spoke. She started going out with friends more often, but never mentioned names. Her clothes were suddenly newer. She changed her perfume. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. It wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I was afraid that voicing it would make it real. And I wasn't ready for reality to change. One evening she came home late. I asked if she had eaten. She nodded. She avoided my gaze and walked straight to the bedroom. I stayed at the table, alone, staring at the cold dinner plate I had set for her. Something about the way she moved felt unfamiliar. And that's when it hit me. This woman who had shared my life for over 45 years was no longer sharing her truth. Still, I said nothing. Instead, I started noticing more patterns, gaps in her stories, how she avoided touch. I stopped asking where she was going. Not because I trusted her, but because I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. There was a moment, sitting in our backyard with a cup of tea, when I looked at her through the kitchen window. She was on the phone, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. And that smile, it wasn't meant for me. It's strange how silence can be so loud. And in that silence, I realized something deeply unsettling. I knew less about my wife at 70 than I did at 23. It happened on a Wednesday. She left her phone on the kitchen counter, screen lit up with a message that said, "Last night was worth every risk." My name wasn't on it. My hands didn't shake, and my heart didn't race. I just stared at it, like reading the final sentence of a book I didn't realize I was in. I didn't confront her. Not immediately. I needed to know more. I needed confirmation. Not from her lips, but from the patterns that would follow. Over the next week I watched. She changed her lock screen. Her phone never left her side. She started turning off notifications. Her stories grew inconsistent. She'd say she was visiting a friend, but the times didn't line up. Once I followed her. Not out of jealousy, but out of the crushing need for truth. She wasn't at Linda's. She was parked at the edge of the river, laughing in the passenger seat of a car I didn't recognize. A man with gray hair, younger than me by a few years maybe. He touched her face. She let him. I didn't approach. I turned around, drove home, and sat in our living room with the television off, lights dimmed. When she walked in 2 hours later, humming a tune from her youth, I looked at her like a stranger who had broken into my memories. I asked, "Did you enjoy your time?" He paused. "Yes," said Linda. Made her laugh. He nodded. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, recalling every anniversary, every homemade birthday card, every time I'd fixed her tea without being asked. All of it now sat on a scale, and on the other side was a lie too heavy to ignore. 2 days later I brought it up. I told her I saw the messages, saw the car, saw her face lit up in ways I hadn't seen in years. She didn't cry. She didn't lie either. She just lowered her head and said, "I didn't think it would matter at our age." That sentence broke something in me I didn't know could still be broken. She told me it started 2 years ago. During the lockdown, when we were home together more than ever, she realized how invisible she felt. She said I had become a fixture, reliable, dependable, but cold. She needed warmth. She met him at the market. He remembered her name. He listened. She felt seen. Asked if she loved him. He said no. But she didn't love me either, not in the way she used to. She said love had turned into obligation. I asked why she didn't leave. She said she didn't want to be alone. Neither of us did. But we already were. That night, I packed a small bag and drove to my brother's cabin. She didn't stop me. She just stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes blank. I wasn't angry. I was emptied out, like someone had reached inside and quietly taken everything without a sound. The cabin was quiet. No clocks ticking, no footsteps in the hallway, no second cup on the table. I had never lived alone. At 70, solitude felt both unfamiliar and strangely calming. I cooked small meals, read books I'd meant to finish years ago, and slept without waiting for her to turn off the lights. But it wasn't peace, it was absence. The kind that echoes. I thought about divorce. About lawyers, about dividing the house, the savings, the memories. But then I'd remember our wedding photo. How young we looked, how certain we felt. I remembered her hands at 40, at 60, and the way they'd always found mine in the dark. And now, they belonged to someone else at least part of the time. Friends called to check in. Some knew, some didn't. My son asked if I'd finally had enough. I didn't know how to answer. Enough of what? Of love. Of trying. Of losing. I wasn't sure what line had been crossed, only that I didn't recognize the place I was standing in anymore. One morning I wrote her a letter. I told her I wasn't angry, just disappointed. Not in her, not entirely, but in us. In how we let years slip by thinking comfort was the same as connection. I told her I missed who we used to be but didn't know if that version could exist anymore. I didn't mail the letter. I kept it folded in my jacket pocket. Weeks passed. She reached out, brief calls, quiet texts. No pleading. Just updates. She said it was over with him. She didn't give reasons. I didn't ask. I didn't need details. I already knew too much. Eventually we met at a neutral spot. We talked like acquaintances. Her hair looked different. She looked tired. She asked if I hated her. Said no. I didn't. What I hated was how much I still cared. She said she was sorry. That she never meant to break anything, she was just trying to feel alive. I nodded, but I didn't speak. Some apologies don't need answers. They just need space to land. I didn't promise to come back. I didn't threaten to leave for good either. I was learning how to sit with uncertainty. For the first time in decades, I was thinking about myself, not as part of a couple, but as a man who had the right to redefine his future, even if it started this late. Healing didn't come in a rush. There was no epiphany, no grand realization. Just small shifts. A day without bitterness. A memory that didn't hurt. A song that didn't remind me of what was lost. I wasn't searching for closure. I was searching for clarity. And in that search I started asking new questions. What does love look like at 70? Does forgiveness mean returning? Or does it simply mean releasing the weight and walking forward, even if alone? I didn't know the answers. But for once, I wasn't afraid of not knowing. I didn't go back to her. We didn't make some grand decision. Just settled. We spoke occasionally. Birthdays, updates about the grandkids, polite exchanges. There was no hatred. Just distance. The kind that grows when trust has nowhere left to sleep. I kept the house, not because I was attached to it, but because starting over at 70 felt more manageable in a familiar place. Cleared out old things. Gave away clothes. Packed up photographs that no longer brought comfort. I started waking up earlier. Took walks. Sat on park benches and listened to the world without needing to be part of it. I wasn't lonely. I was alone. They're not the same thing. I began volunteering at the local library, helping young kids with their reading. Some of them reminded me of my students from back when chalkboards still mattered. There was a quiet fulfillment in showing up for strangers who expected nothing of me. One afternoon I met Eleanor. She was sorting returned books. Widow, sharp-tongued, laughed with her whole face. We didn't flirt. Talk. About music, old movies. How her husband used to burn toast on purpose to see if she'd notice. We met once a week after that. It wasn't romance. Not then. It was companionship. Two people choosing to sit beside each other, without needing to fix or fill anything. She asked me once if I'd ever been in love. I said yes for most of my life. She didn't ask what happened. That silence felt respectful, not dismissive. We never touched the past unless it asked to be acknowledged. We just built something small and steady in the present. Months passed. I stopped checking for Martha's name on my phone. I no longer replayed conversations in my head, no longer counted the ways she'd drifted. There was no finish line to grief, but there was a point where it stopped being the loudest voice in the room. I found peace not in forgiveness, but in acceptance. She made a choice. So did I. That's adulthood. That's marriage. That's life. Things break and sometimes they stay broken. But that doesn't mean you stop living. I began writing again. Short letters mostly. To no one in particular. Some about regret. Some about second chances. One day I posted one online. It ended up on Reddit. I didn't expect anything. But the replies reminded me that pain is universal. And healing isn't linear. I'm not bitter. I'm not naive either. Love doesn't guarantee loyalty. Time doesn't guarantee closeness. But I still believe in connection. I still believe in showing up. Even if it's just for yourself. 70 isn't the end of the road. It's just another mile marker. My story didn't end with betrayal. Started again with honesty. Quiet, painful, beautiful honesty. And maybe that's all I ever really needed.